My name is David. I am 62 years old. And today my heart almost stopped when I saw this. It was the second week of May, a Tuesday that started gray and ordinary. I'd just come back from the feed store, carrying a sack of kibble and a spool of rope, when I heard it, sharp, high-pained. Daisy's cry. My old hound never made a sound unless something was wrong, and that one cut me deeper than any knife. I dropped the rope right there in the driveway and hurried around the back. What I saw stopped me cold. My grandson, Ethan, standing over Daisy with a stick in his hand, jabbing at her while she tried to press herself against the fence. He was laughing. Laughing as if her fear was a game. "Ethan!" My voice came out low, rough, the kind of tone that makes a man freeze. He turned, the stick still dangling from his fingers, his smirk fading into something between guilt and defiance. "I was just playing with her, Grandpa," he muttered. "Playing?" I stepped closer, my boots crunching on the gravel. "That look like play to you?" Daisy's eyes, wide and wet, followed me. Her body trembled so hard I could hear her claws clicking against the dirt. He tried to shrug it off, but his eyes betrayed him. The boy was proud of himself, proud of scaring her. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. I'd known Ethan could be careless, spoiled by his parents' soft ways, but I hadn't known he carried cruelty. I knelt, stroked Daisy's ears, felt her heartbeat hammering beneath the skin. I whispered to her until her tail gave the smallest thump against the ground. Then I stood, real slow, and looked Ethan dead in the eye. "Listen well," I said. "You've just written yourself a debt. And I'm the one who's going to collect it." He laughed then, a nervous, foolish laugh, thinking I was bluffing. But I didn't raise my voice again. I didn't strike him. I only stared, the way a man does when he's already chosen his course. Because revenge, boy, it doesn't come quick. It comes right. And over the next days, while Ethan strutted around like nothing had happened, I began to set my plan into motion. For the rest of that week, Ethan acted like nothing had happened. He came by after school, raiding my fridge, leaving his sneakers by the back door, and talking to me with that half-bored, half-cocky tone teenagers like to use. Every time I saw him, I thought of Daisy pressed against the fence, her ribs shuddering, her eyes begging me for help. I didn't scold him again. I didn't mention Daisy. I simply went about my days in silence, which unsettled him more than any shouting could have. A boy like Ethan feeds off reactions, but when you give him nothing, no anger, no warmth, it gnaws at him. One evening, I called him into the garage. "Help me with some work," I said. He groaned, but he came. On the workbench, I had laid out tools, ropes, and an old kennel I'd patched up. He frowned. "What's all this for?" he asked. "Training," I said simply. He snorted. "Training a mutt? She's already useless. Won't even fetch." I tightened a clamp on the wood, ignoring him. "Not her, Ethan. You." The words hung in the dusty air of that garage. He laughed, thinking I was joking, but I didn't smile. My silence deepened, heavy as the smell of oil and sawdust. That night, I moved Daisy's bed into my own room. She curled against me like she used to when she was a pup, safe for the first time in days. I swore to her, right then, that she'd never feel fear in her own yard again. The next afternoon I started. I left Ethan small tasks, chores he thought beneath him. Scrubbing Daisy's water bowl until it shined, mending the fence where his kicks had splintered the boards, sweeping out the shed. I didn't ask him, I told him. And when he rolled his eyes or muttered under his breath, I only looked at him. That look was enough. But these were just the first steps. He didn't know yet that I was teaching him, not about fences or feed, but about power, respect, and what happens when you abuse the innocent. And late one night, while Ethan slept upstairs during a weekend stay, I began preparing the real lesson, the one he would never forget. It was the following Saturday night when I decided the time had come. Ethan was staying over, sprawled on the living room couch with his headphones on, glued to some game on his phone. He barely looked up when I told him we'd be heading out early the next morning. Where? He asked without interest. You'll see, I said, and went upstairs without another word. I didn't sleep much that night. Daisy curled by my feet, her breathing steady, her warmth reminding me why I was doing this. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her flinching under Ethan's stick, and I knew the boy had to learn something his parents never taught him. At dawn, I woke him. Get up. Boots on. We're leaving. He groaned, complained, but followed, dragging himself into the truck with that teenage sulk that makes you want to cuff their ears. We drove out past the highway, down a dirt road, until the woods swallowed us. Mist clung to the trees, and the morning chill seeped through the cab. Where are we going? Ethan asked again, irritation creeping into his voice. I didn't answer. Instead, I parked near the trailhead, opened the back, and let Daisy hop out. She wagged her tail, nose in the air, eager as always. Ethan frowned. We came all the way out here, for the dog? No, I said, locking eyes with him. We came for you. He laughed nervously, trying to cover the unease in his face. But when I handed him the rope and the small pack I'd prepared, his grin faltered. Inside the pack was water, a flashlight, and just enough food for one person. You're going to take Daisy on this trail, I told him. 5 miles in, 5 miles back. No shortcuts. You'll keep her safe, and you'll treat her with the respect you denied her last week. If you don't, I'll know. He stared at me, mouth open. This is insane. I'm not babysitting some dumb mutt through the woods. That was when I stepped closer, my voice low but hard as stone. You hurt her once. You humiliated yourself in front of me. This is your chance to put it right. Out there, it's you and her. No phone, no friends to laugh with, no one to hide behind. If she comes back whimpering, boy, I swear you'll wish it was only a stick I used on you. For the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. Not the fear of the woods, but of me, of the man who'd raised his father and built this family with hands that didn't shake. And so, with Daisy's leash in his trembling grip, Ethan stepped into the trees. I watched him go, his figure swallowed by the fog, until only Daisy's tail wagging bright against the gray gave me comfort. That was the beginning of his lesson. But it wasn't the end. Because in those woods, I'd arranged something more, a reminder that cruelty always circles back. I waited at the trailhead, leaning against the truck with a thermos of coffee in my hand. The mist curled and thinned as the sun climbed, but my mind stayed sharp. I knew those woods better than Ethan ever would. Every bend in the trail, every hollow log, every patch of bramble, I'd hunted deer there, cut firewood, even camped with Daisy back when her muzzle was still black instead of gray. And I knew exactly what awaited Ethan along the path. I'd prepared it days before. The boy's first mile would be easy enough. A flat stretch along the creek, birdsong softening the silence. Daisy would pull ahead, sniffing and exploring, happy to be out. Ethan might even enjoy himself if his pride didn't get in the way. But I knew when the path narrowed, when the branches clawed at his clothes and the mud grabbed his boots, his temper would rise. That's when the test would begin. See, I'd spoken with an old friend, Carl, the park ranger. We'd set things up. 1.5 miles in, Ethan would find a fork in the trail. One path marked clearly, the other blocked by a fallen branch. The safe way was longer, steeper, harder. The blocked way, shorter, tempting, but thick with thorns and sharp rock. Which would he choose? The second part of the test waded deeper in. I'd left Daisy's favorite ball, a faded red one, just off the trail, nestled in leaves beside a slope. If Ethan noticed and let her fetch it, she'd scramble down easily, but coming back up would take care and patience. Would he help her? Or would he tug the leash hard, dragging her up, too proud to kneel in the dirt? As I drank my coffee, I imagined the choices playing out. A boy shows his true face when there's no one watching, and I had said it so he would believe he was alone. But he wasn't. Carl would be nearby, unseen, keeping watch. And I had other ways of knowing. Because I'd placed an old hunting camera along the ridge. Motion activated. Every gesture, every act of kindness, or cruelty, would be caught. 2 hours passed. The woods stayed quiet, except for the occasional crow. My thermos emptied, the last bitter sip cold on my tongue. Then, at last, I heard it, the crunch of boots on gravel, the soft pant of Daisy's breath. They emerged from the fog. Daisy's ears pricked up as she bounded toward me, tail wagging. She looked tired, dirty, but not afraid. Ethan followed, sweat plastering his hair to his forehead, his shirt streaked with mud. His eyes flickered between defiance and unease, as if he couldn't decide whether to lie or confess. "Well?" I asked. "She's fine," he muttered, handing me the rope. "Happy now?" I didn't answer. I crouched to check Daisy, running my hands gently along her ribs, her paws. She leaned into me, not away. That was enough to ease my heart, but not enough to end things. Because I still had the camera. I still had proof of what he chose when he thought no one was looking. And Ethan didn't yet know that his real reckoning was still to come. That evening, Ethan planted himself in front of the television, a bag of chips balanced on his knees, pretending nothing had happened. He flipped through channels like he owned the remote, like the hike and Daisy's cries out in the woods had been just another boring errand I dragged him on. But his eyes gave him away. Every time the screen flashed, I saw his glance flicker sideways, toward me, quick and nervous, like a thief waiting to be caught. I said nothing. Silence can be a blade if you hold it steady enough. Daisy lay at my feet, her head heavy on her paws. She was tired but calm, her tail thumping the floor in slow, lazy beats whenever I reached down to scratch behind her ears. She trusted me again. That trust was all I cared about, but it wasn't enough to leave it there. Because Ethan hadn't been tested in his heart. Work and sweat might have tired his body, but cruelty lives in a place deeper than muscles. So after supper, while he lounged on the couch, I slipped into the shed. The air was cool inside, sharp with the smell of oil and sawdust. On the workbench sat the trail camera I'd strapped to the ridge the day before. Its little light blinked, waiting. I plugged it into my old laptop and pressed play. The first clips were what I expected, Ethan yanking on Daisy's leash when she paused too long to sniff the air, rolling his eyes as she lingered at the creek, muttering under his breath when her pace slowed. I felt my jaw tighten, but I forced myself to keep watching. Then the fork in the trail appeared on the screen. One way blocked by a fallen branch, the other marked clear but steeper. I watched Ethan hesitate only a second before he kicked the branch aside, dragging Daisy through the thorn-choked shortcut. The camera caught her cry, a short, sharp yelp as a briar scraped her side. He didn't kneel, didn't check her flank, didn't soothe her with a touch. He just pulled harder, cursing under his breath. My knuckles whitened on the edge of the workbench. And then came the part that burned itself into me. Daisy spotted her old ball, the faded red one I'd left down the slope. She scrambled down, tail wagging, happy as a child at Christmas. She picked it up, barking with pride. But climbing back was harder. The ground was steep, loose with gravel. She slipped, claws scrabbling, the ball rolling from her mouth. On the screen, Ethan's temper snapped. He tugged the leash so hard she stumbled, barking in confusion. His voice cracked sharp. "Stupid dog!" He jerked the rope again, impatience etched on his face. And then, God help me, he lifted his hand. Just for a moment. Not striking, but poised to. The hunger was there, plain as daylight. He didn't bring it down. But I could see he wanted to. I replayed that moment again and again, my chest tight, my breath shallow. It was all there, the smirk, the impatience, the cruelty he thought no one else would see. He believed the woods kept his secret. But the camera kept it for me. I sat in the dim shed for a long time after, the footage still glowing on the screen. The weight of what I'd seen pressed down on me like a stone on the chest. I'd thought maybe the labor, the sweat, the long trail walk might have planted a seed of respect in him. But no. He'd carried the same darkness with him the whole way, hidden just under the surface. That was when I knew, this wasn't just about chores or lectures. A boy like Ethan doesn't change because of blisters or tired legs. He changes only when fear digs its claws in deep. I closed the laptop, my mind steady as steel. The next morning, I called him into the kitchen. He shuffled in, hair a mess, yawning, thinking it was just another day. But when he saw the laptop sitting open on the table, his eyes sharpened. "Sit," I said. He sat. I hit play. His face strained as the screen lit up with his own image. The leash yanks, the thorns, Daisy stumbling, the raised hand. He watched it all in silence. His fingers twitched against the tabletop. By the time the clip ended, he looked smaller, hollowed out. "You thought no one would know," I said, my voice quiet, calm. "But I always know." His mouth opened, then closed again. At last, he stammered, I didn't mean." "Enough." My voice cracked like a whip. Daisy, lying by my chair, lifted her head at the sound, then settled back down, trusting me to do what had to be done. "You hurt her once. You humiliated yourself twice. You thought you'd hidden it. But here it is, plain as day." His eyes welled, but I didn't let him speak. "You don't touch her again. You don't look at her again unless it's with respect. And until you earn that, boy, you'll learn what it feels like to be powerless. You'll learn what it means to be watched." He swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" I leaned across the table so he could see the steel in my eyes. "You'll see soon. I've already decided how you'll pay. And I promise you this, you'll never forget it." For a long moment, the kitchen was silent except for Daisy's steady breathing. That was the first real strike of revenge. Not with fists, not with shouting, but with truth and fear laid bare. And Ethan, he finally understood that this wasn't over. Not by a long stretch. I let Ethan stew for a full day before I moved the next piece into place. That was part of his punishment, silence. The waiting. Not knowing when or how I would come for him. I said nothing about the footage, nothing about Daisy, nothing at all except for the ordinary things. "Take your shoes off at the door. Rinse your plate." The more normal my words, the more they weighed on him, because he knew I hadn't forgotten. A guilty boy will sit in his own thoughts like a rat in a trap, gnawing on the bars. That's exactly what I wanted. The following morning I told him. "Outside. Bring your hands." He frowned, confused, but followed me out to the shed. The air was damp, carrying the smell of earth after last night's rain. The grass clung wet to our boots as we crossed the yard. Daisy trailed behind us, worried but curious, her head tilting as though she already understood something was about to shift. Inside the shed, I pointed to the pile of lumber stacked against the wall. 2x4s, nails, hinges, wire mesh, all of it had been waiting there since the day I first heard Daisy cry out under his stick. "You're going to build her a new pen," I said, my voice even. "One big enough for her to stretch in, shaded, sturdy, with no gaps. Strong enough that no one can corner her against a fence again. Not even you." Ethan gave a short, ugly laugh, though there was no humor in it. "I don't know how to build anything." "Then you'll learn," I said, setting the first plank down on the sawhorses. "Pick up that saw." His smirk faltered when I didn't move to help him. His eyes darted to me, waiting for some sign of leniency, but I gave him nothing. At last, with a groan, he picked up the saw. The first strokes were clumsy, the teeth catching and jerking through the wood, but I didn't correct him. The punishment wasn't in the result, it was in the labor. Hours passed. He cut planks until his shoulders ached, hammered nails until his palms blistered. Sweat ran down his temple and soaked his shirt. Daisy watched from the shade, lying with her paws tucked neatly under her chest, her eyes never leaving him. Every now and then her tail thumped the dirt, steady, patient, reminding him who he was building for. When he rushed and a board splintered, I made him cut it again. When a post leaned, I tore it down and told him to start over. Each mistake became another debt to pay in sweat and time. By midday, his arms hung heavy at his sides. "This is pointless," he muttered, voice thick with exhaustion. I stepped close enough that he felt my shadow across his face. Pointless? I repeated quietly. Daisy's ribs remember every strike of that stick. Her eyes remember you laughing while she cowered. This, I tapped the half-finished frame of the pen. This is how you pay back a debt you never should have made. Respect is built, plank by plank. You broke it. Now you'll build it back. He dropped his gaze, jaw clenched. He didn't argue again. The sun dipped lower. By the time we had the frame standing solid, the boy's hands were raw, blistered open in spots. He winced when he lifted the hammer, but I didn't let him quit. Nail it, I said, handing him another strip of mesh. He nailed it, each strike weaker than the last, until the pen took shape, rough, imperfect, but strong. When it was finally finished, Daisy patted over. She stepped inside the new pen, sniffed the corners, then circled once before lying down with a satisfied sigh. She looked at me, then at him. Her trust in me was unbroken, her caution with him remained. And that, I thought, was justice at work. That night, Ethan collapsed onto the couch, too tired to move. He fell asleep there, sprawled like a child who'd been worked past his limit. But I didn't let myself feel pity. Pity is what spoiled him in the first place. Instead, I went back out to the shed. I plugged in the trail camera again and watched the footage of him dragging Daisy through the thorns, calling her stupid, yanking her leash. I watched it until my jaw ached from clenching. That boy hadn't learned his lesson yet, not fully. He'd sweated, blistered, cursed under his breath, but his eyes still carried resentment. He wasn't sorry. And so the idea came to me. Clear as daylight, sharp as a blade. If Ethan wanted power over something weaker, then I would take power from him. I would make him feel what it was to be helpless, to be watched, to have every step weighed and judged. Because work alone doesn't teach respect. Fear does. And as I closed the laptop and shut off the light, I knew exactly how to make Ethan remember Daisy's cry for the rest of his life. At sunrise, I shook him awake. He groaned, pulling the blanket over his head like a child. Up, I said, firm as stone. We've got work. His eyes were bloodshot when he sat up. More hammering? He muttered. No, I said, handing him Daisy's leash. This time, you and her are going to spend the day together. Every step you take, she takes with you. Every rest you get, she gets first. And I'll be watching. He blinked. Watching how? I didn't answer. Instead, I walked him outside, Daisy trotting behind, her tail wagging slow, cautious. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, the world still half asleep. I led them both to the far corner of the property, where I'd strung a small bell on a post and hung another motion camera above it. What's this? Ethan asked. A test, I said. That bell will tell me every time you come near. The camera will show me how you treat her when you think I'm not looking. And make no mistake, boy, I'll see everything. The color drained from his face. I set him simple tasks, walking Daisy down to the creek and back, brushing her coat, feeding her from his own plate at lunch before he touched his food. Each time he tried to cut corners, that bell would ring, reminding him he wasn't alone. Each time his patience frayed, I'd step out from the shadows of the porch, silent as a judge. By mid-afternoon, the resentment had turned to something sharper, fear. I saw it in the way his eyes flicked to the trees, as if he expected me to step out at any moment. He tasted what it felt like to be watched, weighed, judged with no escape. Exactly what Daisy had felt under his hand. But the real turn came when Daisy, trusting him a little more, nudged her muzzle into his palm while he sat on the grass. He froze, stiff and awkward, but she stayed there, leaning against him with the simple faith only a dog can give. I saw it from the porch. His hand trembled. He could have shoved her away, but instead, he let it rest there. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was the first crack in his armor. When the sun dipped low, I called him in. You think it's over? I asked. He nodded quickly, desperate for release. I shook my head. No, Ethan. What you've done can't be undone in a day. This is only the beginning. Tomorrow, you'll learn the hardest part, the part that'll stay with you long after I'm gone. His lips parted, but no sound came out. Daisy, at his side, gave a small wag of her tail, as though she understood more than he did. And I knew then, the final stage of my revenge would come soon. That night I barely slept. The house was quiet except for Daisy's breathing at the foot of my bed, and the creak of old wood settling against the cool spring air. My mind turned over what I had planned for Ethan, weighing it like a craftsman studies his last cut before putting the saw to timber. It had to be sharp, clean, final. Something he would carry forever. At breakfast, I kept things ordinary. Bacon, eggs, toast. Ethan ate fast, thinking maybe I'd decided to let it all go. He was wrong. "Get your boots," I said when the plates were cleared. "Why? Where are we going this time?" "You'll see." We drove up past town, farther than before, into the hills where the roads narrowed and the pines grew thick. Ethan fidgeted the whole ride, glancing at Daisy in the back seat, then at me, then out the window like a prisoner being driven to his fate. Finally, I pulled up at the old quarry. The place hadn't been worked in decades. Jagged stone walls surrounded a pit filled halfway with dark, still water. The wind cut sharp through the hollow, carrying the smell of wet rock. Ethan looked around uneasily. "Why are we here?" I stepped out, let Daisy down, and handed him a blindfold. His face paled. "What's this for?" "Put it on." "No way." My voice cracked like a rifle. "Now." His hands shook as he tied the cloth around his eyes. I led him by the shoulder, the way he had once dragged Daisy, until we stood near the edge of the quarry. The stone ground crumbled faintly under our boots. "Do you feel that?" I asked. "What?" His voice was high, tight. "The ground under you. The edge. One wrong step, and you're gone. Powerless. Just like she was when you had that stick in your hand." He swallowed hard, his breathing ragged. I let the silence hang, heavy and terrible, until he whispered, "Grandpa, I'm sorry." "Sorry isn't enough," I said. "Fear, that's what teaches. You wanted Daisy to feel small, helpless. Now you know what that is." I pulled the blindfold off. His eyes blinked against the light, widening when he saw how close he stood to the drop. His legs buckled, and he staggered back, pale as ash. Daisy barked once, sharp and clear, breaking the silence. I crouched beside him. "Remember this, Ethan. Remember how it felt when the ground disappeared beneath you, when your life wasn't in your hands anymore. That's what you gave her. If you ever lift a hand to her, or any creature that can't fight back, you'll find yourself at a real edge next time. And I won't be here to pull you back." He didn't answer. He just nodded, his chest heaving, sweat dripping down his temples. I clipped Daisy's leash back on and turned toward the truck. "Come on," I said. "We're going home." Behind me, Ethan followed, slower, smaller somehow. And though my revenge was complete, I knew this story wasn't finished. Not really. Because the question that lingered, heavy as stone in my chest, was whether fear could grow into respect, or if cruelty was already carved too deep into him. That answer time alone would tell. It's been months now since that day at the quarry. Daisy lies here beside me as I tell you this, her head heavy on my boot, her breathing slow and steady. She's not afraid anymore, not of the yard, not of Ethan, not of shadows moving where they shouldn't. She trusts me, as she always has, and that's all the proof I need that I did what had to be done. Ethan still comes around, though not as often. He's quieter now, more watchful. Sometimes I catch him staring at Daisy, and there's no cruelty in it anymore, just something unsettled, as though he's wrestling with himself. Maybe that fear I planted will ripen into respect. Maybe it will rot into bitterness. That choice is his. As for me, well, revenge is a heavy thing. It doesn't taste sweet, no matter how you picture it in your head. It sits in the gut like iron. When I think back on the look in Ethan's eyes at the quarry, part of me wonders if I went too far. Another part says not far enough. But then Daisy lifts her head, licks my hand, and I remember the trembling in her body that day he cornered her against the fence. No creature deserves that. Not from strangers, and never from family. So I sit with my choice. I taught the boy a lesson, even if it scarred him. Maybe scars are what it takes to keep a man honest. Maybe scars are the only teachers that last. And you, listening here, remember this. A man can forgive insults, debts, even betrayals. But harm done to the innocent? To those who trust us completely? That can't be left unanswered. That, my friend, is where mercy ends and justice begins.